I'm going to officially open the Southampton Planning Board. It's really not a special meeting. It's an additional meeting. The only agenda item we have tonight is to finalize the edits of zoning revisions. The sign ordinance we have to complete. We didn't get to it the last meeting, and that's what we're going to work on tonight. All members are present except Dan, who asked to be excused, and Dan LaValle, for the record. And the reason for this is we have a public hearing that we've got tentatively scheduled for March 30th, correct?
I think so.
Okay, that's what I signed up for, and hopefully we can pull that off. But we have to finalize this zoning ordinance and then move on from there for Richard to have the next few weeks to cull all that information that we've worked on and finalize it for the hearing, and then after the hearing, pass it on to town meeting for their approval or disapproval. So without further ado, Richard, we're working on, what is it, 7-8-50?
8-50.
8-50.
8-50.
So proceed.
Okay, the first point is in the paragraph 1, there's a reference to the state building code and such permit to be granted only in accordance with the following regulation of Article 4. There's no need to cite the state building code because you can't negate the building code through zoning bylaw. So we don't need to make reference to that. 2A. There's some references here like any traffic or directional sign shall be permitted. I'd suggest having an exemption category that certain signs would be exempt, and that would be any traffic or directional sign or construction owned or installed by governmental agency. That would simply be exempt from the zoning bylaw.
Before I go any further, just to introduce Ryan Gilliger, he's a member of the zoning board, and currently under our existing bylaws, signs are criteria for the zoning board. So that's why he's here to weigh in on maybe some of the experiences they've had over the years directing. So go ahead, Richard.
Hey, I'm sorry, can I interrupt just one more thing?
Go ahead,
Can
Paul.
someone put up the pertinent section? So this could, because we got a bunch of folks on here. I don't know if Rich, you have that, or Sarah maybe can share.
I can do that. Good idea. I'll pull it right up.
All right, Paul, I didn't see anybody other than us on here, so. But I mean, I see what you mean for the channel 191 folks.
Everybody see that?
Yep, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
2A makes reference to permitting traffic and construction signs, directional signs installed owned by a government agency. Instead of permitting those, I think they should simply be exempt. And I suggest having a section under sign regulations of exempt signs, and that'd be one of them.
Ryan, any issue with that?
No,
Can you think of any others that will come up, or?
Yeah, there are others that typically do. I can't think off the top of my head, but there's others, but that's the main thing is because traffic control signs, they're in the right of way. Most government signs are in the right of way, and zoning typically doesn't regulate the right of way. Because that's a publicly owned land that you can't use except for the roadways, utilities anyway. But
Well, and
and,
it's
and if you comply with the manual for uniform traffic control devices for installation of traffic signs, that's a very rigid standard already.
You have something on that, Ryan, or no? You have a
no,
comment?
I was just gonna say it. Yeah, you got to get it because it gets into health and safety, and Richard is correct on the standard that's going to supersede anything that we potentially put in there. It would be overridden.
Okay, proceed.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry, Paul.
Go ahead.
Is there any kind of like distance, size or whatever is the, like if I wanted to put a super big, I was gonna say political sign on my yard, and I've seen them around town. Do they fall into this category?
Oh,
No.
these are signs owned or installed by governmental agency.
State law, building code.
So for instance, when your DPW puts up a stop sign or a street name sign or yield sign, or if a water department is doing work on a water line and their contractor puts up a, or they put up a work zone sign. Those are type of signs that are covered by this. Political signs is a whole nother issue.
So is that going to be addressed, you know, a sign which may be, you know, some homemade signs that people will put up and.
And those shouldn't be going in the right of way.
So I guess, I think you guys are talking about two different things. So you're talking about if these are addressed by this whole section, right?
Yes,
So this section, I think, does address signs
but-
on lawns, or it should, but what's exempt is just things, stop signs and such.
okay.
2A
The
only
exempted
lists-
exemptions. Okay, so this little bit later on, we'll come up with homemade signs that say.
2A
something.
is strictly construction, traffic, and directional signs owned or installed by governmental agency.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
So that's what's exempt, yeah.
2B talks about temporary interior window displays. My question is that should we have definition of what temporary is?
Good, that's a good one. So
Doesn't
like-
it say
like-
temporary shall be construed to mean any period not exceeding 30 days?
But is that what you intend for these signs? Because look at, this talks about interior window displays for automotive establishments, such as you have a, I guess, a cardboard sign on a inside of the store that shines out or looks out. Are they going to be limited to 30? What is a temporary sign? Is it a sign affixed to the window? Is it a sign that any sign that's visible from through the window?
Well, temporary signs are for, you see, for instance, when I had reconstruction after the fire there a couple of years back, the contractor was allowed to keep his sign on my property until the project was complete. Now, the project was complete within 6 months, but I don't know what the regs were beyond that. And the other thing I'll mention is signs for retail. People that are going out of business are allowed by state to have a going out of business sale. And I think they can do that and have, I don't know about signage, but they can certainly, and they want to have signage, but going out of business sales can take up to 9 to 12 months
I know.
that the state allows them to do.
And this refers to interior signs, interior window displays. Is it the, no, I just want to be sure that we're talking about, we want to be sure that we're limiting those to 30 days. Is that what you really want to do? I just raised that question.
It sounds
Cause-
like maybe not, like 6 months or 9 months is more reasonable, based on what you guys are saying for retail and contractors.
Yeah. I think maybe more helpful to have a definition, because for instance, is it any sign that's visible through the window? Because if I've got a store and there's a sign in there that's visible by people who walk in, but is also visible through the window, is that going to be considered a window display sign?
Now, 2B also refers to automotive. Are you asking to strike automotive, or are you going with retail in period on that?
I would suggest that it be retail, I'm
Right.
not sure why automotive is in there, but there may be a reason that you're more familiar with why a particular issue of automotive arose.
I'm not.
Because I would think that'd be more of a broader retail classification issue than, and maybe Ryan is familiar with the in particular issues that have arisen on this. I don't know.
I mean, my 2 cents on this is maybe taking out the automotive and saying temporarily construed not to exceed 250 consecutive days. Cause that would be like 7 months, right? 8 months.
8 months.
8 months.
So it's like a happy medium.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know what you're saying about a window sign versus a sign that you can see through the window. I mean, we don't have a ton of storefronts, so I mean, there again, who's going to police this? Like, if Big Y's putting up a sign, in their windows, or then is the chalk on the window? Is that technically a sign? You know what I mean? Where like
Technically, it is.
yeah. So I mean, I don't know if Big Y paints a Santa Claus on the front windows for Christmas and it's up there for 45 days, then they do an Easter bunny 2
Mhm.
months down the road for 45. I don't think we have that many storefronts. We have that many issues, but I think if it should be more than 30 days. And there again, it's a policing thing.
Right.
It makes you wonder, though, if it's kind of onerous, because people have their outside signs and those are regulated on their buildings or on the street. So why would you even want to regulate something
On their
inside retail and inside a retail establishment that's on the windows? I mean, outside the windows is one thing because they're hanging banners, but if it's on the inside, what's it harm really?
It's I mean, it's no different than putting a window shade up, right?
Right.
I feel like this is gonna be one of those, we're gonna be on a YouTube video of the silliest
Yeah,
codes in New England or in the United States. Just keep that in mind.
There'd be a lot of communities that would be on the YouTube video. One thing about-
Richard, what's your experience with that on these temporary things? I mean, it almost seems to me that they could be thrown out on the interior.
I think there's appropriate to have a temporary regulation, and I'd suggest having a subcategory that regulates temporary signs because there's several places that talk about temporary signs.
Right, I agree with temporary signs, but I think interior window displays, if I have candles, I leave up in my window, like people use at Christmas, but I leave them there all year. I think that's up to me. I don't think that's.
Well, you shouldn't be more than 30 days, Sarah.
Right.
And I think the issue is how much of the window do they take up more than anything else? Because you don't want the window sign taking up the entire window. And that is, I think, the most important aspect to it.
However, on going out of business sales, typically they do.
How about a for sale sign?
Yeah, and also, isn't there like a size issue? Like, what if it was a small sign that says masks required? And does it have to be a retail, like Sarah mentioned, lights in her window? Well, I don't think is running a retail establishment. And So what if she's got candles in her windows? I just wonder if that should be clarified here.
I don't think candles in window would constitute a sign.
All right,
But-
Okay, sure, but people
But they
put up,
could be.
thank you healthcare workers or whatever. I think that there needs to be something that if I want to, I don't know, just puts either over a certain size or gets rid of the interior window display.
Yeah.
Like,
I would suggest that maybe we look at a limitation on percent of the window that can be occupied by signs. And I know that's been a approach in some communities because crime is one issue that people want to be sure it's visible. It's not shielding something that's not appropriate. Or in some
Okay.
cases, that is shielding things that shouldn't be shown.
Look at all the, just for an example, the package stores that have banners of all the beer and booze and wine you can think of that are plastered along
Right.
their windows.
Yeah, and some of them do that to bypass the restriction on percentage of the wall that can be occupied by a sign.
How does this compare to other communities? I mean, is this? I feel like we're probably maybe putting too much thought and effort into this. I mean, can we?
I suggest take out window display area and just limit the temporary signs, a period of it, and we look at maybe next year look at how should we treat the area that's attributed to a temporary window sign.
So are you suggesting then to take temporary out and replace it with exterior? Now, exterior would make sense, but not interior.
Yeah. I think I would take out window display and just say temporary interior signs, because that's what people are talking about. And make it clear that we're talking about signs that are visible, that are directed to be viewed from the outside, not indirectly. Because somebody's got a display on the inside that's intended for their patrons coming in, that it shouldn't be treated as a temporary window sign. It's not.
So is everybody good with that?
Yep.
Fine.
All?
yep, here.
All right, go
And-
on to number C.
Yeah, I would suggest a separate section on illuminated signs and take item 1 under 2C1 and put that in separate section on temporary signs. Illuminated signs.
Yeah, this was, Paul, this was one issue we had. The bottom of it, flashing or animated signs are not permitted, and red, yellow, green color lights shall not be permitted. Cumberland Farms has that red at the bottom of it. I think it has the gas price. I don't even know. I don't pay attention to what it says, but they were before us probably 5-10 years ago, and they were changing their signage. And that's one of these things, is the color that came up. I don't know why they chose these colors. Maybe because it was traffic light colors
Yes.
back in the day.
That would be the rationale.
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue anymore.
I think red, yellow, and green are issues, or can be issues, depending upon the sign, how big they are, where they are, those type of things. If you're talking about red, green, yellow used for purposes of display prices of gas station, that's typically not an issue.
Right, and that was the example.
I
mean, I don't-
The more common prohibition is you can't have any signs that resemble a traffic control device.
Paul, do you have any comments, Frugal, on this at all with your experience?
Which Paul?
Frugal.
So Yeah, I think for us to have restrictions on private signs, I think that's silly on colors or lighting or anything like that. And frankly, it's not like a sign that's gonna be in line or in sight of an expected traffic control device, right? I mean, to me, I don't see that as a concern. My 2 cents.
Has there any examples of problems that requires that we have a good bylaw for this? Like Richard, are you aware of any circumstances where it was a darn good thing there was a bylaw?
I've seen situations where the curvature of road is such that if somebody had the wrong sign up, it would line up and would be distracting. The issue is a distracting sign, and I'm not sure in Southampton, the roadway alignments where the commercial is would be a particular problem with a red, green, yellow sign being distracting to the motorist. That would make such that they would construe it as a traffic control device.
So typically national standards in terms of putting up signals and such, those are in the middle of the road
Right.
of the travel lane. So I don't see that as a conflict. Are you going to have light pollution, potentially spillovers? Yeah, but how is that different than any other
Right.
corridor in the country? I mean, look at Route 5 in West Springfield, right? It's not that we're saying we want something like that, but this to me seems a little stringent.
Yeah, the language that baffles me here is flashing or animated. Now, a lot of signage is not flashing, and a lot of it's not animated. It's there and it's lit. Now, I don't know what the definition of animated is, but flashing certainly I do.
I'm assuming animated is meant to mean a
Anything that's
moving
lit.
image,
What's that?
a moving image.
Okay, so it like a Cumberland Farm store wouldn't be flashing and it wouldn't be animated, correct? It does change occasionally. Is that considered flashing when it changes now and again with the prices?
It shouldn't, because it shouldn't be changing that often. Usually regulate by the frequency of the change. Message board signs, I think is more what I would consider a price sign at a Cumberland Farms.
Right.
Because it's more like a message board than it is a animation. It doesn't have cartoon characters strobing across it, and doesn't have lights flashing on and off on a frequent basis.
Does continuous message qualify as animated?
It could.
Like a scrolling message, you mean?
Yes,
Yeah, right.
that could be anime because it's a moving type image. It depends on how it's done.
So what you're suggesting, you want to take that out of there and just move it to illuminated, but then we'll have to deal with it down the road in illuminated, right?
Or prohibit the sign. If the question comes up, do you want to, right now, those two type signs, flashing or animated, and red, yellow, green colored lights are prohibited. I'm hearing from Paul Frugala that red, green, yellow shouldn't be prohibited. And I would suggest just have that into a prohibited section, and let's discuss it at a future time. And let's just have a section on what are clearly prohibited signs, or how you're going to regulate illuminated signs. Regulating illuminated signs is a real big problem because of how it's done. If you
Well,
try to,
Yeah, and certainly the size of them.
yeah, I've had a number of issues more with the planning board than because what happens is becomes kind of arbitrary at times. What is permitted and what's not permitted. You need to have some very clear standards on those. But that's what I would suggest, just move that into a separate section. I don't think it needs to go under where it is right now.
Everybody good with that?
Yes,
2D and 2E, you have sections below on the R districts and C and I districts. I think those should be moved to their respective sections and not under the general.
That's fine.
2F. The limitations as to the number of signs permitted does not apply to traffic or directional signs which are necessary for the safety and direction of residents, employees, customers, and visitors, whether in vehicle or on foot, of any business, industry, or residence. That's very vague.
That's pretty wordy, isn't it?
It's wordy and it's very vague.
Yeah.
Doesn't really tell you what it's trying to regulate. If this is traffic or directional signs by local government or state government, that's one thing. But I'm assuming this is talking about traffic or directional signs on private property relating to the circulation of that on that property. That's my interpretation of what they're doing. And I'm assuming they're trying to say, if you need, you're not going to restrict the number of signs if you need 2 egress, 2 ingress signs. Or if you need to put a stop sign in your parking lot, that doesn't apply to the limitations on those. I think that can be regulated as a incidental category, and we can word it differently. I've never applied those type of signs, the limitation of one freestanding sign to those type of signs, because those are essential from a public safety perspective.
Yeah, I think we could just have a note somewhere that building safety signs are excluded from these.
Or parking lot safety signs, egress, ingress signs. Because if you got a grocery store that's got 2 entrances and 2 exits, they need to have those labeled enter and exit. If that's how they regulate them, they probably want to have some type of yield for pedestrians at the crosswalk, which you should anyway.
Right, so building safety and traffic safety signs are.
Interior to the property.
Agreed.
Yeah. And then 2G1. Yeah. Again, I'd suggest having prohibited sign category and put roof signs are not permitted under that category and not buried in here. All I want to do is have a prohibited section that draws attention to those, and people don't just skip over them because they're buried in here somewhere.
Any comment on that, Ryan?
you're muted, Ryan.
No, I haven't had any roof sign issues.
So they're prohibited, so they shouldn't have any. And on H, any district, one unlighted, should be unlit or non-illuminated, temporary sign of offering premises for sale or lease for each parcel in one ownership shall be permitted, provided. Then talks about size. And I would say just let's have temporary sign category and put that in there. There's too much in the general regulations that we need to try to break temporary into a temporary category so people can see what's temporarily regulated.
I think the 6 square feet is too small, though.
Really? 2 by
In a
3?
And that's the problem thing in a residential district. 6 square feet might be fine, but in a commercial district, it's not.
Right. There's a 4x8 sign on Clark Street with a parcel for sale. And that's typically what a commercial realtor uses.
If you've got a speed limit that's 20, 25, 30 at most, and it's residential, typically it's 6 square foot is ample. But if you've got a commercial corridor, you're going to typically want a 4x8. They're going to put a piece of plywood type sign.
So do you say not exceed 6 square feet in an R district and not
Yes.
exceed 32 square feet in the others?
Yes. That's what I would suggest. I don't know how everybody else feels.
I agree. I think that's more than reasonable.
And then I don't have a problem with the 4 square foot limitation because you're talking about someone doing work temporarily. I see these more commonly with contractors and landscape contractors.
Yep.
I rarely see them with architects, engineers, except on construction projects, major construction projects. But even then, they're tend to be on the construction fence on the outside. I think 4 square feet is ample.
Does it give, it doesn't give the time frame though, Richard, should it? Or so many days after work is completed? I don't know, but the only reason I say that is because my contractor had mine out, a couple weeks after the job was completed and the building inspector made a phone call, have it taken down.
Wait,
I
you
would-
know what? I'll call you right back.
I think it's ample to give them 10 calendar days to remove the sign once work is complete. They've ceased work on the site.
You want to include that?
We can.
How does everybody feel with that?
I think that's good.
That works.
Because I would tell, I've seen signs for contractors and folks up there 6 months after work is done.
What about, like a private homemade sign? And I know there's one right on Pomeroy Meadow Road it's been up there like almost a year. I think some local person wants to sell some property. It's a homemade sign. And it's probably less than 10 feet from the street line. And it's not an engineer or an architect or a contractor. Is this going to be covered in another section? They're just trying to sell their land.
That is under H. And they should, and if they're not set back 10 feet from the road and they're more than 6 feet in square feet in size, that's a zoning violation. It's up to the building commissioner to take enforcement action.
I'll go down and measure it. Do you know which
Or
side I
just-
mean? Yeah.
Yeah, it's bigger than 2 by 3.
Yeah.
So you can just make call to the building commissioner, say the sign's up there and it looks to be too big and too close to the road.
Is there any, Ryan, just before we continue, is there any fee for signage permits or anything like that, to your knowledge? No?
No, definitely not for real estate signs. I don't, for,
For
When they put-
businesses?
when they put a large sign on a building, that's through the building department. There's fees with that, yeah.
And the next couple questions about individual districts. We want to clarify that our district means the residential districts of the ones that are in town. And I'm gonna put that in the definition section, what our district and what commercial district, industrial district mean. One unlighted temporary sign relating to a new residential subdivision during the actual period of construction. What is the actual period of construction? Some would argue, I would argue that once the planning board
years,
has
isn't it?
released, I would argue that once the planning board has released the performance guarantee, the period of construction has ended.
Well, typically now it's what, Ryan, 2 years, correct?
Yeah.
But the best way of regulating that is if you still have a performance guarantee on the subdivision, then it's still under construction. And what you can do is to ensure that the sign is removed, you don't release the performance guarantee until they remove the sign. We had that situation with a subdivision about 2 years ago, and the planning board kept the $25,000 performance guarantee because the developer had a 4x8 construction sign at the entrance. And it violated the zoning bylaw for one. And when we kept the $25,000 performance guarantee, they got his attention and he did remove the sign rather quickly.
I like that, don't you, Ryan?
Yeah, yeah. I think the 20 square feet should be 32 though.
Yeah, 20 is an odd number to have.
The 4x8 sheet of plywood is what they typically use, so.
Right. And 20 means you don't even do half, you do a little more than half of that. It's a strange size. So I'll clarify that actual period of construction refers to the period during which a performance guarantee is in effect, held by the town. And E, except for professional nameplates and the residential nameplate, any other sign in so set back at least 1/2 of the required depth of the front yard. What I would do is suggest there must be setback X and then have an exemption that nameplates and are exempt from the setback. You want to draw attention, they have to be set back and then say, but you can exempt these. So you can draw that attention, don't them to not be drawn to the setback requirement. So basically reversing the wording a bit.
So just to clarify, I agree with reversing the wording. What this means, shall be set back at least 1/2 of the required depth of the front yard.
Right.
So closer to your house than the street, is that the idea?
Yeah, so if your front yard setback requirement is 40 feet, let's say, they'd have to
Okay.
set back at least 20 feet.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, and then to 4B. Items 4B. what does general advertising sign mean? I think it's trying to just off-premise advertising sign.
That's about as big as it gets, right? General advertising.
Yeah. So I assume it's talking about off-premise advertising sign. And if that's the objective, then I think it's better not say that's prohibited, but rather just say the only signs permitted are advertising of goods and services available on the property.
Comments? That's a good one.
That seems fine. I mean, I'm not quite sure what it means, so.
Okay.
Oh, just for clarifications, District C is,
Commercial.
Commercial.
Commercial highway, commercial villa.
And I'm defining those in the bylaw because it is in several sections, the bylaw refers to any R district, any C district, any I district. I want to define those so it's very clear what it's referred to.
General advertising.
I am confused about this. So in the commercial district, signs are permitted. General advertising shall be prohibited, but this is in the commercial district.
Right.
Did we establish what general advertising it is?
We think it means off-premise advertising. And the better, yes, billboards. And the better approach is to just say within the commercial districts, only signs advertising goods and services available on the property are permitted.
Does that allow for billboards?
No.
Okay.
About as good as you can do with it, I guess, because general is. You're
Yeah,
right, Richard. You can only assume what the people were thinking of back then.
Right. The next one M refers to should be 4D3. If illuminated, it shall be internally. Let's see. Yeah, I would suggest that there be a general section on illuminated signs and 4D3 be part of that.
Well, that's what you suggested early on in
Right.
2C1, right?
Right.
Have you got any issues with any of these, Brian or Ryan, that you've had to face some of the other paragraphs there?
No, that's what I was just, the ones I'm reading through basically are the square footage. I want to say off memory, O'Reilly's came to us because their sign was a little bit bigger than 40 square feet. And then there was an issue with the distance. And the height. And I actually made them, I think, raise it a little bit just because I was concerned about visibility for traffic for the intersection. I think we gave him a variance for that. Because 40 square feet is
Are you good with the 10%? Or 10% or 40 square feet?
10% of where
Of
Yeah,
the
D,
wall.
yeah, D, 4D2
oh,
says 10% or 40 square feet, whichever is the lesser.
How does that work? I'm just thinking of an example, like you look at Big Y, how do you think that works? That's bigger than 40 square feet in square footage, no?
Well, 10% or 40 square feet of the wall area, that wall area is pretty big.
Or 40 square feet, whichever is lesser.
Yeah,
So-
so it'd be, the max would be 40 square feet.
Right, right.
Right, so that Big Y sign on the front of their building is no way it's compliant. Because 40 square feet's,
5 by 8.
yeah. That, I'm gonna guess that Big Y letter is a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, but do you think they got a variance years ago too?
They could have, I'm just, we're not gonna solve all, I'm just trying to think
No.
if some of these things, we bump them up a little bit more within the, the realm, then we minimize some of the potential for variances. But
I
I guess,
think,
go ahead, Richard.
my suggestion would be that when we make revisions next year, we look at doing that. And I'm gonna suggest next year, we also interject a provision for special permit for altering the size limits.
Okay,
Because variances is a questionable standard to use for those, but a special permit is used in a number of different communities to address the exact issue that you're talking about.
all right, so we'll just leave it the way it is.
I think you got a very good point, because in some cases, due to the size of the property, the nature of the roadway, the use, the size of the building, the larger sign is appropriate. 4E3. E3, yeah.
No sign over 30 feet?
Above the ground or sidewalk. Does that apply to, my questions about, and this applies to all this whole item, the sign, or does it include the pole? Does a pole have to be no higher than 30 feet in height?
I would say the whole thing, the pole sign assembly. Nothing should extend past 30 feet in the air.
Right, it says any portion.
I'd say that because that's been a topic of discussion over the years.
So Ryan, did the urgent care center sign come before the zoning?
Yes,
Oh, it did? Okay.
Well, would you take out any portion, just it should not be erected over 30 feet above the ground, period?
No,
Maximum?
What I would do is I'll just make it clear that that includes pole as well as sign. Because what sometimes they would do is they would do a pole that's 35 feet, have the sign hanging off of it, and you want to make sure that, no, they had to stick within that itself. Or they will have a 2-column structure. And we used to apply the questions is, are the support columns part of the sign or part of the sign structure? And what I'm hearing you say is the sign structure is what you're regulating, not just the sign itself, not just the portion that's conveying a message, but the whole structure is what's being regulated.
Mhm.
Would this apply to those things you see that are like blow up dolls that, keep getting blown up and collapsing, or that's not a sign?
That's not a pole sign. That's not a
Okay.
pole sign.
Okay.
Isn't that considered temporary too?
yes.
I would, yeah, it should be temporary.
Well, the one, it's in Easthampton, but on the Verizon store, it's been there for years.
There's a lot of temporary structures that stay there permanently. Yeah, I've had issue with temporary garages that there for 4 or 5 years or longer. Again, on item 4E, let's see, it's 4E4. It should be part of a general section on illuminated signs. 4F. How, my question is, how is this different from a pole sign? 4E. One freestanding sign for each lot frontage for business stash provided. So you're differentiating between pole signs and freestanding signs, or is this another type of pole sign?
Can we just fold this one into the pole
That-
sign one?
That's a question. I mean, how does the board want to address that? Because it suggests to me there's a conflict here, because saying basically one freestanding sign and one pole sign, how are they different? And they're not, if they are, then we should describe that. For instance, you may allow a monument sign. That's not a pole sign. Monument sign may be, and that may be something you want to encourage. Because those to be more nicely landscaped and they can be nicely done. They're not up in the air. But that's a question that I need clarification from you as to.
So is the library sign considered, it's not a pole sign, it's a standing sign, you know, the one right out near the road, Edwards Public Library?
That would be a monument sign.
So that's a monument sign.
Right.
Hmm. What about
And-
these signs that we have a couple in our town that are, you know, community service signs, you know, the Lions Club has one and the Mothers Club has one. Change the letters on them. What kind of sign is that?
Those are message board signs,
Oh, okay.
and they're probably similar to a monument sign.
So are you
Pole
saying that-
signs typically are tall and they have a sign on top of them or a sign that's affixed to the side of them, hanging out like a flag sign, flag orientation. Monument signs tend to be lower. Usually within the top is no more than 10 feet off the ground. And they may have a landscape base around them. Or may not, but that's typically they're lower and they're not up high in the air. And like this talks about no more than 12 feet.
I think that we should speak to both of them. I think the question is more, do we allow one of each for a business, or can they have a pole sign or a standing sign?
Yeah.
I
Right.
do. I agree with you that I think the idea of having standing signs is nicer, like, than having 30-foot tall pole signs. I'm not sure what you do to encourage that, but I guess the main question is, can you have one of each, or can you just have one or the other? Right? Is that kind of Richard, what you need to know?
Yeah, and you can encourage one versus the other. For instance, what you could do is say, you know, one standing sign that's allowed by right, and you want to have pole sign, you can have that, but you require a special permit. And that means they have to go through the special permit process for pole sign. That would definitely discourage them from going for a pole sign, because it's going to be more cumbersome to do that. And the monument sign, the standing sign is only in the CH district, not in all C districts.
So that's commercial historic,
Highway.
no commercial highway.
Mm,
I don't know, a 30-foot tall sign, 40 square feet, 30 feet up in the air is relatively large for our town. I mean, I understand there's places that have it and it makes sense, but what does everyone else think about what Richard just suggested, doing a standing sign by right, 40 square feet down near the ground, 12 feet height, 12-foot height, and then a pole sign by special permit? I don't know if we're creating more work for ourselves, but
So who gives the special permit in this?
that's what I was gonna ask her for Ryan.
Right now, ZBA.
Yeah, but you're not gonna get abundance of them. I mean, I've had 2 sign requests in 10 years, so. I mean, it gives you better, better bite into this to control, like, and I'm with Sarah, like O'Reilly, the pole sign and it fits, but you don't want to see those going up everywhere all along Route 10
Yeah,
without some kind of control, because then otherwise it's like Paul had said, it's gonna look like Riverdale Road.
So post signs by special permit then, and the standing sign is allowed by right.
Yep.
Okay,
And again, for F4, where it talks about illuminated sign, that should be in the general section on illumination. That's all that I had. Yep. That's all my questions on that. The signs.
Nothing in the I district is, everything there okay as far as you're concerned?
I didn't see any issue. I didn't have any questions about that.
Well, we don't have a big I district anyway, so.
Again, I would put any illuminated regulations within a separate area regarding illumination, because they tend to be very similarly worded in each district. I know in South Hattie, there's a big issue with illuminated signs about 20 years ago, and they started requiring planning board approval of all illuminated signs. That became more work than we ever expected.
I think if we're asking for planning board approval, of pole signs that are 30 feet in the air, that would cover major issues. I mean, if you have a sign close to the ground and you have a little landscaping light shining on it, I don't see that being a big issue in here right now in Southampton.
Now, just one question on the I district, and I know we don't have a big I district. The biggest one is out there on Valley Road. Smaller ones, Clark Street. Is Clark Street's industrial, right?
Correct.
Are those businesses, would they be allowed like on Route 10? Because they're down Valley Road and they're down Clark Street. Would they be allowed to have a sign out on Route 10, directing them, people to them, or is that kind of like overkill?
Typically, you can't do that.
No?
No. Typically, they have to be on your property.
They're probably allowed if it was an industrial park, right?
If it was a commonly owned property where one entity owned all the property and the roads are privately owned, then yeah, it would be allowed.
Yeah, gotcha.
Now, some communities allow those, and they have provision to allow directional signs of businesses. The problem, and about 10, 12 years ago, there was an effort to do that here. And there are some businesses that had signs such as Brunel's Marina. Somebody pulling up for that. And I raised the question, well, that's fine, we all support Brunel, but what if somebody wanted to put directional signs up for Anthony's, which is an adult business? And the reaction was, oh, we don't want to do that. Well, once you start allowing businesses to put signs up in your right of way, it's tough to say this business can, but this business can't.
Is there any other, Ryan, anything that hasn't been covered in here that you had anything come up in recent years, months?
No, recent months, no, years, it's just been the location of a couple signs, setback in the square footage. And one thing that stuck to me was that the red color for the Cumberland Farms.
Can I ask for some clarification on pylon signs? They could be either a pole sign, depending how it looks, or a standing sign, right?
Yeah, I would expect it to be more of a pole sign because standing signs are limited to 12 feet from the ground or sidewalk. Although
Okay,
that needs to be, I'll clarify that too, because if you have sloping ground, then which is the measuring point?
I mean, I'd say from the lowest point, but
That's my point. I would do that too.
I guess my point being is, you know, not to compliment one sign over another sign, but you know, there are pylon signs that are, you know, CVS might have that I've seen that it's probably 25 feet up in the air, but it looks like a standing sign, meaning it's like a contiguous support that's not on a pole per se. And this goes, you know, it's the width of the sign that goes down. So I take it that the pylon support before it says CVS would be considered, for example, the pole part of it. I would imagine that's the clarification I'm kind of trying to understand.
Yeah. I would say yes, but I see your point. It's a good point.
I think some communities have pylon sign ordinances or standards or zoning requirements. So I almost feel like we probably need to beef that up a little bit.
The problem the type CVS sign you're talking about would have is if you treat the whole structure as the sign, you're limited to 40 square feet, or is it 40? Yeah. And if you've got, and that's not a lot of area. So if you got a 15-foot high structure that's 4 foot wide, that seeds it. I think that becomes problematic in trying to fit that type sign into a pole sign. But yeah.
So you pretty much wrap this up then?
I think so. Yeah.
So I'm missing something, sorry.
Go ahead.
Clarify for me. I brought up the question of personal handmade signs, maybe sort of advertising a personal bent, a political bent or something like that. Do we have any restrictions on that on your own private property? I've seen them in different places, different towns.
Yeah, I don't see that in Southampton. I'm trying to see.
So I mean, they have to be set back at least half the setback, because they would, so like a political sign, it would be subject to 3E, I would say. So it has to be set back further than the 10, normal 10 feet. But then do we want to add some sort of size limitation or time limitation for signs like, I mean, we're really largely talking about political signs.
And some of them that I've seen were highly offensive, not just supporting a particular political position, but they used, profanity. And I know there was one in Easthampton like that and it was taken down. And I know of one in this town that's got the implication of profanity in it, and it's very high and it's not set back. I mean, do we have any zoning bylaw on that?
Not that I see, and it's a tough question because the legal standard on signs is that you can regulate time, place, but not content. And the most recent major Supreme Court case, one of the justices said, if you have to read a sign to determine if it complies with the First Amendment, then your bylaw is unconstitutional.
Wow.
So that kind of answers the question on the profanity, unfortunately, but what about size and time limitation?
Size, time, and place. No, you can regulate.
So
easily.
for residential, do we want to add an F or something, add to this section 3 on limiting size for residential signs?
Or you
I
what you
would.
could do is say, in residential districts, you can have one temporary sign for a period of no more than X amount of days in a calendar year of this dimension. And this-
I mean, it does get to a big policing thing too, obviously, but.
Oh, they could rack up some good fine money.
I just think that we have to do something, because otherwise, if something's highly offensive, I mean, we have all kinds of policies in our country that avoid, harassment, et cetera. And why should a neighbor have to look at something that's truly offensive?
Mm.
And that we don't have any way to regulate. Yeah, we have First Amendment rights, but I think there should be limitations. That's,
Let me draft up something to put in there and we can see what we can come up with.
well, do
Yeah,
people agree that that's a good idea?
Yes, yes, and Cindy and Sarah points well taken, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That must be the motion to adjourn.
Somebody's got children in their house, I think.
And what I'm doing now, just so
Nobody I know.
the board's aware, what I'm doing now is I'm going back to all the stuff that was worked on before I came in the picture. And I'm making sure everything's in the same format throughout. I'm also finding some stuff where there were some blanks left or some question marks from what Larry gave me. And what I'm going to try to do in the next, hopefully by early next week, is make a list of all those and I'll send them to you, and then we can discuss how those blanks should be filled in and get all that in order.
I need to express appreciation for Richard, because he's really kind of helped move this along. It's been great.
Thank you.
I agree.
Because he doesn't go to Mexico like someone else we knew.
We
I,
hope Larry's doing well. We
I
really
do,
do.
I do too. He deserves it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't go to Mexico. That's because my kids live in California, Texas, and North Carolina, and my mom lives in Georgia. If my kids live right near me, maybe I would go. I wouldn't go to Mexico. I might go to Canada or something where it snows.
If there aren't any other further questions, then I can move on to adjourn. But where's your dinner? What time's your dinner plans there, Ryan?
It's just gonna be something simple here, Paul,
Oh,
because
I'm sorry, we spoiled it on you.
it's tomorrow's another day.
Okay.
Aren't you going to sing happy birthday to him?
No, please don't. Please don't.
Richard, you start.
I mean, if it was in person and Cindy brought me cookies, I'd be okay.
Well, thank you all for doing this. We wanted to get this together because we got that hearing and we want to keep this moving forward as best we can. So thank you all. And I guess we'll see you next week because we're on again. If there's anything on the agenda, that is. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Sarah,
Second,
who made the second? Cindy?
yep,
All in favor? Cindy, yes.
yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Oh, yes. All right, thank you very much. Have a good night. Have a good
Thank
week.
you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Right.
Paul.